All right. Hi, good afternoon. Do we have any fans of Greek mythology here by any chance? Okay, great. Me too. I'm a huge geek for Greek mythology. One of my favorite stories, and you would know this if you read Homer or Euripides, or if you saw the epic movie of 2004 starring Brad Pitt, Troy. You'll know of this character called Cassandra. So Troy obviously is all about the beauty of Helen of Troy and everything, but Cassandra's is a character that is of particular interest to me because she has a very interesting backstory. Cassandra was the daughter of King Priam and Queen Hecuba, same parents as Paris of Troy, and one night she seduced the god Apollo. Because she knew if she was able to seduce Apollo, she would get some sort of power from him. And he was promising her the power of foresight and prophecy. When it came to that moment, she decided not to give herself to him, and he spat in her mouth. I know it's very graphic, sorry. He spat in her mouth, and he still gave her the power, but he said, every prophecy that you utter will never be believed. So she foretold the end of Troy. She foretold her own death, which she accepted with a smile. And this interest for me, this story is very interesting for me because I feel like it resonates a lot to where we are today. We know of so many quote-unquote prophecies and so many truths, yet it's so much easier to just ignore them because sometimes the truth is inconvenient. Just the other day, we all know that the environment is deteriorating on a daily basis, right? And I'm really actively trying to reduce my usage of single-use plastics, and everyone's been talking about that, but I really try to do it day to day. The other day I had a shoot that started at 7 a.m., and I just got way too lazy to wake up at 3 in the morning to go to the wet market, which I usually do before every shoot. So I decided to just go to the supermarket at 7 a.m. right before the shoot. If you could put the next slide. And so I ended up with this. And I'm very hard on myself, by the way. So I got really mad and angry because I felt I was being very hypocritical. I made a video about plastic usage, and here I am going to a supermarket and using too much plastic. But that's just how things are sometimes. You know, it's a pattern in our lives. And the problem that I see is that each time we face these kind of decisions and everything, we're constantly reacting to things. And I think that's the worst way to go about anything, is just, you know, we should be objective enough to take a couple steps back and plan and organize ourselves and not react to situations, because reactions tend to lead to impulses and things that you don't necessarily want to do, and you don't really identify yourself with that. Couple examples, I go to one of the upscale gyms here in Taguig, and every morning, no fail, I end up opening the door maybe for 3 or 4 ladies that are going into the gym. Not once do I get eye contact or a thank you or a smile. And that makes me really sad because I don't expect to be like, oh my God, thank you so much. But at least acknowledge the person who's doing a very good deed. And for me, you know, whatever, I don't really care. But I thought about the guard that opens the door in every mall. Like that guy, day to day, opens doors for people who are not grateful for his job or for what he's doing. Or people in restaurants not being very kind to waiters, and that gets me really sad. But we know the morality of it. We know what's right, what's wrong. It's just what's right is sometimes a bit harder to do. If you get stopped by the police or stopped by the cop, your first reaction is to try to say, no, I didn't do that wrong, even though you knew that U-turn, you weren't supposed to take it, or you weren't supposed to wait on the side of the street. You still try to react in a way that conserves and preserves yourself. And that same person, 4 days later, will be at a dinner party complaining about the traffic in the Philippines, mostly due to undisciplined drivers. It's very hypocritical. So if you give in to impulses, it'll always push what's supposed to be right until tomorrow. And I don't think that's very healthy, because if I ask a lot of people, you know, if you had one superpower, what would it be? And a lot of people say time travel. And that means because a lot of people live with regrets, right? And, you know, I always tell people, like, I basically time traveled at one point in my life because it depends on your perspective. If I do something today that affects the future, then in the future, my past would have been altered and I would have been happier. So I always tell people, you know, if you're going to make a change, why wait till tomorrow? Make that change today, because tomorrow you're just going to want to push it back. And so that's why I started realizing these patterns, and I'm a very quiet person, so I love to observe these things. And that's why I wanted to give this talk today, and talk to people who know that there's something innately wrong and that want to make that effort to be healthy and to get fit. I'm not talking about weight loss or fat loss or getting abs or anything like that. I'm talking about people who just want to be healthier and take advantage of, whatever stage they are in and their full life force. So before the diet and the workouts, the one thing that usually a lot of people tend to ignore is the power of the mind. And that's why I wanted to talk about the power of the mind. Mindfulness and consciousness, I'm sure you've heard this tons of times today, will ultimately just make you a better person and hopefully a better human being. When I came up with the name of my blog, The Fat Kid Inside, a lot of people thought it was funny and catchy, and really, in reality, it's because I really just felt fat inside. And until this day, you'll see me in videos and stuff pulling down my shirt and everything. It's because I think people can see my stomach. Even though that's mostly gone, I still feel like it's there. It's a sort of body dysmorphia that I know I have, and that till today I kind of have to deal with. And at least I've accepted that, and I've accepted that part of myself. I was about 240 pounds. No, sorry. That was a little surprise. I was about 240 pounds at this point. And since then, I lost a total of about 90 pounds over 3 years. 60 of those pounds I lost in 6 months. And when I was looking at it, this was at the time where Atkins came out, South Beach Diet, and all these things. It was kind of like the start of the revolution of all these big diet words and diet books and gurus and whatnot. And I knew that the first thing I had to do was work on my mind. So what I did, instead of jumping in cold water and not knowing what to do, I bought about 10 different books, and then I summarized those books. Then I made an actual physical mind map, and I found the intersecting knowledge between all the books, and that became my truth. So that summarized information became my truth, and once I had that, I challenged it and researched it to see whether or not it would actually work for me. Because I understood from a young age that the world doesn't necessarily bend for you. You need to adapt to it. It'd be very selfish to think that the world has to do things for you. You need to adapt to it, and you need to make the extra effort. We are all built absolutely differently, and I'm sure you've heard this in all the panels, depending on your hormones, depending on your genetics, depending on your socioeconomic realities. There's so many things that make us different. So the one person that comes up to you and says, hey, I have one solution for you to get healthy, is trying to sell you something, right? But what they can't sell you is the discipline, the mindfulness, and the work rate that you need to achieve your goals. You can put the next one. Enjoy. He's on a plane right now, so he can't protect himself. So this is my brother-in-law, Nico. So Nico and I basically live together. We have an office together. And I made this because I thought it was funny, because this is the same picture repeated over and over again, but this is pretty much the evolution of Nico Bolzico's body. He has not changed. And in fact, if you look pictures of him from 10 years ago, he was even more buff. Both Nico and I lead extremely similar lives. We both work out every day. This man does not lift weights at all. All he does is run. I lift weights and I run. He eats copious amounts of food. I think yesterday he ate 2 ensaimadas from Felicia's in Bacolod, which are absolutely delicious, by the way. And he had about 1.5 kilos of steak. I had 2 bowls of tuna salad, 2 sweet potatoes, and 1 boiled seba. I know. Very sad. Yet if you go to the next slide, this is my change since 2011. By the way, this is petrifying to put this up here. This is me since 2011. If you pay attention, 2018, well, this one's covered, has 3 different body shapes. And that's because my body just changes so quickly when it comes to workouts, when it comes to foods and everything. 2011, I was lazy and I wasn't doing anything. 2013, that was triathlon, so I got really dry. 2018, heavy lifting. 2015 was swimming. So my body adapts. But I have certain problem areas, which is the stomach mainly, that just even if I work out like crazy will just never go away. And I've accepted that. But, just when you compare two different people, you actually shouldn't be comparing yourself to anyone, because some people, I have a friend who speaks 8 languages fluently, and he learned through phrase books. And he speaks them fluently now, which is insane. And then I have some friends who can't even speak 1 language properly. And so we just need to realize that some people, certain people, will just have to work harder and sacrifice more than others to achieve their own goals. It's as simple as that. But it doesn't mean that it's impossible. So for the longest time, I've been criticized for saying things like, anything's possible, everything's possible for people. If you can put the next slide. I used to say this thing called, it's easy, just start, suck it up, and stick with it. And because that's how I treat myself. I'm very black and white, and I respond very well to kind of these aggressive messages of just shut up and do it. Like, that's how I talk to myself. But I realized that not everyone would understand that. So along the years, I started featuring other people who I've worked with or who have been reading the articles that I put up and who have kind of like gotten fit along the years to prove that really, anyone can truly do it. You can go to the next slide. So I started doing articles, and then I progressed to doing phone interviews with them, and these are just a couple. So this is Angelica over here, and she's the one you're going to see on the first video. Angelica, I believe, was a legal aid, so she's 21 now. Over the last 7 months, she's dropped down from 87 kilos, where she felt extremely medically unhealthy. And then now, and what struck me about her story is that she wakes up every morning at 3 in the morning to prep her food, which is insane. I would never do that. And after work at 6 p.m., she walks home 2 hours just because, she wants to walk it off. And that's her every day, and that's her routine. And she told me that she lost friends along the way and everything, but she realized that the friends that she lost through this journey weren't friends to begin with. And she is now in a space where she's very happy and very content with herself. And this is just a snippet of the interview.
If you want to stick to a healthy lifestyle, because every temptations, you'll see any temptations around the corner. And then you ask yourself if you really need to maintain a health lifestyle, because some people will tell you that you only live once. But we need to maintain healthy and fit body to do more in our life.
So if you didn't get that, the gist is basically that her motivation to be healthy at first was to just lose weight and look better. Eventually, she realized, as she went through the paces, she realized that she could just do more with her life, be more active, be more productive, be more efficient. This brings us to our next interview. This is Melvin over here. So he lost, similar story to mine. He lost about 90 pounds. His dad had 2 strokes. The last one was fatal. And that was the motivation, or not the motivation rather, but what spurred him into taking action to his whole life, because again, he was getting to a point like I was where you're medically obese and it's affecting how your body works overall. Did you play that?
Consistency and doing things smartly.
Intelligence, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of work hard, right? But if you don't do it smartly, I mean, that would, for me, it's gonna be, and also look for something that can motivate you, right? I mean, if you don't want to be bedridden for the rest of your life.
Okay, so I can't hear it that well, but basically what he was saying is the best approach to anything is to just do it smartly. So even before jumping in, to take the time to organize yourself, to prepare yourself, prepare your mind. And he finished by saying that, he didn't want to spend the rest of his life sitting in a bed, and realized that he had to do something. And now, so this guy works graveyard shifts. He's been in the call center industry for the past, I think, 10 years, which makes it really hard to find a schedule to work around. And he's managed to do it. And now he finds motivations in helping others and inspiring others in their own journeys. And I think that's admirable. So what do all these people have in common? What does everyone who, people with disadvantages, whether it's physical or social, that are able to rise up and eventually, achieve great things, what's their secret? For me, it comes down to wanting it. and to being able to recognize the sacrifices and make them to reach your personal goals, whatever they want. Over the years of interviewing people and sitting alone at night and writing, I developed a system to kind of organize my thoughts, and I call that grit. So grit is something that for me is very important because not only do I like the word or how it looks, but it also means a lot to me. So G starts for goals. So this is the first step in anything. It's really setting your goals. And it's wrong to look at numbers. It's wrong to look at body fat percentage and all that. I always ask people, if your goal is anything else but what makes me happy, that's the wrong goal to have. You shouldn't be getting healthy because of the girl you met at the beach or because you're following Fitspirations on Instagram and you want to be that. Those are all the wrong reasons. The idea is to just do what makes you happy, because a perfect body, honestly, at the end of the day, will not make you happy. For me, my initial goal was to just get fit. I couldn't keep up with my friends anymore. I had a hard time walking upstairs. Every time I'd walk more than a kilometer, my legs would rub together, and I get massive blisters, and I couldn't walk with my family even. I had to take taxis and cars and stuff, and it was super embarrassing. So that was my first goal. After a while, I was like, you know what? We're doing pretty well. Let's try to have a six-pack. So that was around here. So having a six-pack was my next goal. And then I realized, because of how my body works, because of my hormones, because of how bad my thyroid is, having a six-pack for me would basically mean that I would eat steamed vegetables for the rest of my life. And I was like, that's a compromise I'm not willing to make. Eventually, it turned into performance and just being happy, because I realized picking up a sport, competing, being good at it, trying to be good at it, trying to be the best at it, made me happy. And once I realized that, I was like, actually, this whole time, I was just trying to be happy. And I got to a point where I got so comfortable, and I was like, right, this is it. This is exactly where I want to be. And now I'm in a situation where anything I do in terms of improvement is really just to push my mental ability and to push my physical ability to see how far I can go. And because I think human disposition is all about evolution and trying to better ourselves. To quote another Brad Pitt movie in World War Z, he said, I think movement is life. And you have to always keep moving and moving forward, or else you get really, bored. I know when I'm going to be 40, I know my hormones are going to go all over the place. I'm already, getting receding hairline and stuff. And you know what? That's going to happen. I just have to adapt to it. Write down a new set of goals and then figure stuff out. But I won't complain, and I won't compare myself to others. R in grit stands for realism. Instagram, they talked about it a while ago, it's not real. There's clinical studies, which for me I find hilarious, about how it's affecting people's minds and everything, because it's gotten that bad. Like, it's funny in a very bad way. Realism for me is one of the most important things, because you can lie to absolutely everyone in your life, but at the end of the day, if you lie to yourself, that's the worst possible thing you can do. So if you're spending your time trying to perfect poses and photoshopping and using Visco or whatnot, trying to get perfect Instagram feeds and stuff, and then finding some sort of contentment in the comments of how hot you were, at the end of the day, you're lying to yourself. And when it comes down to it, and you're looking at yourself through the mirror and you're seeing a stranger looking back at you, it's not a good feeling. And I know that sounds really harsh, but you need to tell yourself the truth and be honest with yourself all the time, because at the end of the day, and I don't know why in the society it's so stigmatized, it's okay not to be okay. Like, you don't always have to be happy. It's cool to be sad. Go through, again, what they were saying a while ago, go through your seasons. When you do something wrong, admit to it. It's as simple as that. You're told that as a kid all the time, but we forget that as we get older. And just make sure not to repeat those mistakes and be honest with yourself. Because at the end of the day, whatever your goals are, if you really look at it, what's standing between you and achieving your goals, most of the time it's yourself. You can blame anything you want, time, the world, money, anything like that. But at the end of the day, the problem that you need to look at is, okay, what am I doing that's preventing me of being who I want to be? And that's super important. It's a really long conversation. It's a very harsh conversation to have with yourself, but it is so enlightening. I'm getting 10 minutes. Perfect. I'm on time. I in grit stands for intelligence. If if you are someone who's able-bodied, you're not sick, you're not working 17-hour days, at the end of the day, there's really no valid excuse. It's all about being smart enough to know who and what is good for you and cutting out the unnecessary. If you don't know where to start, the best way to start is research. So we unfortunately are a generation nowadays of headline readers where a good title explains the whole article, and I'm sure a lot of people here are guilty of sending or reading half articles, watching half videos, sending them to your friends and be like, oh, you'll love this, and then you realize at the end it's something completely different. But it's really important to go to the end of things because school didn't make you the most smart person. School for me just gives us the tools to understand life and then to further educate ourselves along the way. And I think that's super important because, you know, the internet's here. Are you going to use it to watch cat videos, or are you going to use it to actually better yourself and make yourself a better person? With this access to knowledge, though, comes a lot of responsibility because, you know, there's a lot of fake stuff going around, and especially with nutrition. I totally get it. I read research papers and I get confused because there are and this is something you'll learn, is there are very few absolute truths in the realm of nutrition. Every year there are updates coming out. What the government puts as nutritionally sound diet plans are usually back-funded by lobbies and stuff like that. If you guys remember the Got Milk campaign, the whole Got Milk campaign was funded by the dairy lobby in the United States. The whole reason why you're told kids need to eat cereal in the morning with milk is because of the Got Milk campaign that partnered up with the wheat lobby in the US, who are basically trying to kill all the animal produce coming in the US. So you get, if you can get to the next slide, you get magazines like this. So Time in 1984 telling you cholesterol is terrible, then Time in 2000, I think 14 or 15, telling you to eat butter, and then now Time coming up and saying, all right, you should be eating whole nutrition. People in the field of nutrition, doctors themselves, continuously contradict themselves. And that's because everything's put through scientific knowledge, and science is all about challenging the status quo and the knowledge that's out there, which is normal, which is why you get such different ideas on what nutrition should be: low carb, high fat, keto, paleo. There's so many different terms nowadays, it gets really confusing. And then you have, you know, and there's a documentary that came out last year called What the Health. And I remember people sending it to me saying, hey, you're doing everything wrong. And I'm like, if you think, and I have nothing wrong with veganism or vegetarianism. I know I can get in trouble for saying that, so nothing wrong with that. But don't use one documentary as the Bible for your whole nutritional lifestyle. Like, you're smart enough to challenge it and to look for different sources. I came out with 150 peso a day a healthy eating plan last year because people were asking for it, and I got bashed by a bunch of nutritional students telling me it was wrong, and because they were basing themselves on their books that they learn in school with. But we all know history books can be changed, so why can't nutrition books be outdated? And I did check, and some of the books that they were quoting were from the early 90s or late 80s, so things change. And that's why I think it's so important to not think you're the smartest person in the room, but smart enough to be able to go to the end of things. And I think once you start doing that, you start seeing the whole picture, and you can actually balance things. And what's important is, at the end of the day, you find something that works for you. Like, not something that works for someone else, something that works for you. And one way to do that is experience. And for me, experience has always been the biggest teacher because you can talk to people who have gone through certain things, and you can see whether or not it applies to you as well. If you were to ask me what I think healthy eating is, and this is a very simple breakdown, and literally I try not to eat anything outside of here. Whole foods, grown naturally, spiced with salt, herbs, spices, steamed, baked, boiled, sautéed, raw, lean proteins, legumes and nuts, coconut or olive oil, fruits and vegetable, whole and processed starches, and just eating in general as unprocessed as possible. How many steps does it take for the ingredient to be able to be edible? Simple as that. If you take something like oats or rice or anything, they need to be dehusked, they need to be cleaned, they need to be sometimes pre-steamed, and then eventually you can eat them. Whereas an apple, quote unquote, I can grab it from the tree and I can eat it straight. So I try to eat as much as possible closest to the source. But the way I do this is I experiment, which is why earlier this year, I did an experiment where I didn't eat anything for 7 days. I just drank water, no coffee, no tea, no sugar, whatever. And it's super unhealthy. It sucked. It was the worst week of my life. But I did it because I wanted to unlearn everything that I was taught about food. I started realizing, I'm like, why am I eating 3 meals a day on a schedule? I'm like, who else eats 3 meals a day in a schedule in my household? My dog, Pancho. And I was like, all right, why am I like a pet? Why do I need to be conditioned to eat 3 meals a day? Why can't I just eat when I'm hungry? Simple as that. And then I realized after doing this, it was a reset to my body. It was an eye-opener because, one, I wanted to understand what hunger was, because I was getting angry when people were saying things like, I'm starving. And I'm like, really? Your last meal was 6 hours ago. How are you starving? How can you use that word that a lot of people in very impoverished countries deal with every day, and you're using the word starving? And sorry, I get very emotional about these things. So I wanted to unlearn all of that. I wanted to learn the true meaning of hunger. And by day 4, that's when I learned, and I was like, oh shit, this is what it feels like. And it didn't feel good. And I wanted to also know and feel nutrition. It sounds really weird, but the day 8, first of all, day 7, I wasn't hungry at all anymore. I just hated my life, but I wasn't hungry. Headaches and everything you want, but I wasn't hungry. And then I ate a watermelon and drank coconut water, and I'm not kidding you, within an hour, I felt the energy of the food, which for me was insane. Because before, you're always eating. It tastes great, but you don't feel the energy that it gives you. But when you think about it, food is fuel, right? You put fuel in a car, you can run it more efficiently and longer. So it should be the exact same thing with food in your bodies, because your body processes that nutrition so that you're able to walk and run and work out. And once I felt that, I was like, wow, so food really does have an effect in that way. And so the most important thing that I learned from here, and this wraps up the intelligence, is that there are 2 ways to eat. You eat for entertainment, and you eat for fuel. Whatever you want to do, do it, but be very conscious of why you're doing that. And I think that for me is mindfulness, is knowing exactly, oh, I'm eating this because I'm going to run a marathon tomorrow, or, I want that carrot cake from Wildflower. I love it. And I'm going to eat it just because. But, do you, but know why you're doing it. And I think that's super important, rather than saying, oh, no, I'm not feeling good, or complaining about things. It brings me to my last point, the T in grit, which is tenacity. So it's self-explanatory. These are just synonyms from synonyms.com. And I'm not going to elaborate much on it because it speaks for itself. It's just really important to learn how to embrace failure. I actually look for failure because it freaks me out, and I learn so much from it. To not be ashamed of failing, and from that pile of failure, to build something completely new. Because every time I failed, the 10 times I failed, I've probably done one thing right and succeeded once, but that one time was so worth it compared to the 10 failures that I had. So to wrap it up, next one. I think at the end of the day, if I were to kind of just sum it up in one word, it's grit. So it's having the courage, the resolve, and the strength of character to actually do what you want to be able to do and to achieve those things. Thank you.